Hey there, web wizards! Welcome back to Techno Space, where we light up your coding journey with bright ideas. Today, we're diving into a topic that often confuses many: CSS Grid versus Flexbox. When should you use each? Let's clear up the confusion with some fun examples and deep dives. Ready? Let's go! First up, let's talk about Flexbox. Flexbox is perfect for one-dimensional layouts. Think of it as arranging items in a single row or a single column. To understand these layouts better, let's create some designs and observe the use carefully. Here, we have a simple Flexbox layout. The items are arranged in a row. We'll use justify content. Space around to space them out evenly. The display property with flex value is the key to form a Flexbox. And the default orientation is always rows, which you can eventually change if needed. Easy peasy, right? Now let's dive a bit deeper into Flexbox basics. Flexbox has two main components: containers and items. The container is the parent element, and the items are the children inside it. You can align and distribute items using properties like justify content and align items. We can use the justify content to arrange the child items. It can have different values, such as space between, center, space around, and so on. The main idea here is to club the items with respect to the parent container. Now, let's move on to CSS Grid. Grid is a two-dimensional layout system, perfect for complex designs where you need rows and columns. For the test, create a grid container div with a few child items. After this, we will move on to style and understand the logic of CSS Grid. Again, the use of display property is must with grid value. It will make the container a grid where we can work on both rows and columns together. Back to the Flexbox part, I missed something here. Using justify content with value center centers the items horizontally, while align items center value centers them vertically. Flexbox also shines when creating responsive layouts. There's also a property available to help with responsive layout design. With FlexWrap, wrap value, items will move to the next line if they don't fit in a single row. The Flex property allows for flexible item sizes, creating responsive designs effortlessly. In this example, we use grid to create a layout with two columns. The grid template columns with value repeat 2, 1 FR creates two equal width columns. Here each column is of 1/2 fraction of the available width. The gap property adds spacing between the items. Looks neat, right? Again, we will style the grid items with some background color. Set some padding around these items. Finally, add some border to make each item properly visible. With this clear, visible distinction, you can see that a Flexbox is always either a row or column, whereas a grid has both, no matter what. We can make grid work in only one dimension, but that supposedly destroys the whole idea of grid layout. If you want to work in row or column, use Flex. For both, use grid. Let's break down some fundamental concepts of grid layout: rows, columns, and areas. You can define the structure of your grid using grid template columns and grid template rows. Our setup creates a grid with two columns, where the second column is twice as wide as the first. The rows are defined as auto and 100 pixels respectively. We can control grid item placement with properties like grid row start, grid row end, grid column start, and grid column end. As a shorthand technique, we can use just the grid column or grid row property to specify both start and end values altogether. Here, the item spans across two columns, thanks to grid column 1/3. It stays within the first row. It spans all the way from first place to the third, covering entire space. With grid row 1/2, grid gives you precise control over item placement. So, when should you use Flexbox and when should you use grid? Let's do a quick recap of what we have done as far. Then we will discuss the pros and cons of both these layouts. We have created both Flexbox and Grid layouts. Now let's discuss the Flexbox first. Flexbox is best for one-dimensional layouts, row or column. It is ideal for navigation bars, simple alignment tasks, and small-scale layouts. We can align and distribute items with justify content and align items. We can use it for responsive layouts with FlexWrap and the Flex property. On the other hand, CSS Grid is best for two-dimensional layouts. It's perfect for complex layouts like web pages, dashboards, and any design that requires precise control over both dimensions. We can define grid structure with grid template columns and grid template rows. Control each item placement with grid row start, grid row end, grid column start, and grid column end. So, in my understanding, usage of both grid and flex depends on the layout requirement. Think of Flexbox as the perfect tool for aligning items in a line, while grid is your go-to for creating complex, multi-dimensional layouts. Let's look at some real-world examples to see these in action. Here's a simple navigation bar made using Flexbox. So, the HTML structure is easy to understand. Now, to the CSS part. Style the new nav bar with Flex Display. Use space between to justify contents. Align the items to center. Then set a dark background with some padding for each nav item. Make the text white. Keep in mind these texts will become links, so use anchor selector here. Here's a simple navigation bar made using Flexbox. The links are spread out evenly using justify content. Space between. Perfect for a clean, horizontal menu. Now, we will use the grid layout to display some blog post here in our demo webpage. So, create the HTML structure with some demo data. I'm using the lorem ipsum text for display. Create a blog grid with at least 4 to 6 items. The start styling with the grid display. Arrange the contents in 2 columns, each having equal width. Then set some gap between these. I think the parent blog container needs some padding. 10 pixel padding should be enough. Alright folks, that wraps up our quick dive into CSS Grid versus Flexbox. Remember, Flexbox for simple, one-dimensional layouts, and Grid for complex, two-dimensional layouts. If you found this video helpful, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe for more web development tips. Until next time, keep coding and stay creative. Thanks for watching Techno Space.